All right, so Ms. Perry, as we discussed, we're going to be recording this meeting, um, and I assume that's okay with you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so I have with me my colleague Matt Studer,
Hi, good
um,
morning, June.
who was assisting
Morning.
me with the investigation. So, do you have a hard stop at any time?
No, not
Okay.
particularly.
All right, we should be done by what time are you done today? 5 o'clock. We should be done. Matt, what do you think we should be done by 5, right?
I thought this was like a 1.5 to 2 hour meeting.
We should be done in that time. All right, so.
Thank you.
All right, so I just want to ask you some questions about your educational background, employment history. So, did you graduate from high school?
Yes,
Where'd you go to high school?
Shrewsbury High School.
Is that in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts?
It is.
Okay. And after you graduated high school, did you go on to further your education anywhere?
Yes, I went to SMU in North Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and got a bachelor's degree.
SMU, what does that stand for?
Back then, it was Southeastern Massachusetts University, and now
Okay.
it's UMass Dartmouth.
Oh, okay, UMass. Okay, good hockey team, right?
Yeah, they didn't have a hockey team when I went there.
Okay, okay. They're competing. They compete for national championships now. So you went to the university that's now become SMU, that's now become UMass Dartmouth, and you got a bachelor's degree. Is that correct?
Yes,
And what'd you get a bachelor's in?
management.
Okay. And did you go on to further education anywhere else after that?
Just taking appraisal courses. So I got my certifications in Connecticut, and I took all the classes that were required. And now I'm a supervisor in the state of Connecticut and have been for many years.
Do you also have a license to do that type of work in any other state?
Yes, in New Hampshire and Vermont, they're not licenses, they're certifications. So you
Okay.
have to pass their tests and then you get certifications. And then after you do the initial test, you have to keep doing 50 hours of education every 5 years to recertify.
So is it fair to say you have you have certifications to perform revaluation work on behalf of municipalities in the states of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Connecticut?
Yes, and I also work in Massachusetts. They don't require the certifications, but they require your company to be certified. And
So
then,
you're all okay. So you're also certified to do that type of work in Massachusetts. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay. And where's Vision located?
Hudson, Massachusetts.
Where's that?
It's right centrally located just outside of Worcester, Mass.
Okay. Okay. So um, after college, where was your first job?
At Vision.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I've been here since 1987.
Wow. 1987. Okay. Um, so you started with Vision in 1987. What was your first position with the company?
Data collector.
And for approximately how many years did you do that?
Just a few years, actually, just a couple of years I data collected and then I moved up slowly. So I've pretty much held every position in this company up to district manager, which is the position I hold now.
So you were data collector. What did you do after that?
I became a staff appraiser.
And then after you became a staff appraiser, what did you do after that?
I became a project manager. And then I became a district manager.
And that's the position you're in now. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is entailed in being a district manager?
So as a district manager, I also have project managers that work under me. So they run their own projects. So let's say they have 4 projects of their own. They also, are in constant communication with myself. And then I have a boss above me.
Okay. So you have one person above you. Okay. And so do you oversee revaluations that are conducted in various municipalities?
Yes.
Over the years, how many municipal revaluations have you overseen in your career? I mean, you may not, I assume you can't give me an exact number. Could you give me an approximate number?
Well, I mean, for the number of years that I've been a district manager, it's been one number, typically I do 4 to 4 revals a year myself, and then my staff does revaluations. We also do what's called interims and statistical updates. So, through the years, I don't know, 20, 30, 60 revals, 70 revals.
If you had to give a range, what would you say is a range of municipal revaluations that you've participated in on behalf of Vision? Well, let me ask this. Let me break it down. What would you say is the range of municipal revaluations that you've overseen as a district manager?
So again, when you say a range, do you mean the people who work under me as well? So,
Well, whatever you signed off. I mean, for the ones that you've been in charge of.
so typically, for the last 10 years, I've probably done 40.
And so is it fair to say that in your position as district manager, you've handled about 40 municipal revaluations?
Yes,
And then in your position prior to being a district manager, did you also oversee revaluations?
I did. I was a project manager prior to that. And so again, I'd probably say 40 over the previous 10 years before that as an estimate. It's not an exact number.
Okay, so you've done approximately, is it fair to say that you've either as a project manager or as a district manager, you've handled or been in charge of approximately 80 revaluations? Does that sound right? Or do you think it's a bigger range?
I think that's approximately correct over my career.
Okay. And so what do you and of those 80, do you know how many have been in Connecticut? Or approximately?
I would have to look that up.
No problem. I
really
wouldn't
don't.
expect you to know. Tell me, do you remember what communities in Connecticut you've done revaluations for over the years?
Just this year, I just completed Glastonbury, Connecticut, and Sterling, Connecticut. Last year, we did Enfield, Connecticut. I'm currently doing Hampton, Connecticut, and Lyme, Connecticut I've done. Chaplin, Connecticut I've done. Stonington, Connecticut I'm working on. There's just a lot. South Windsor, Granby.
Keep going. What else that you remember?
Union. Ashford, Connecticut. Holland. Well, that's Massachusetts. There's a whole list of them on my resume, which I could also provide to you.
That would be great. Could you
Sure.
Email to us your resume?
I sure will. It's also included in the RFP that the town has, so you probably have it.
I don't know if we have the RFP submission, but if you can send me your resume, your updated resume, that'd be great.
Okay. I might make it a little easier for you. There's
That would.
listings of all the towns on my resume.
Thank you. How does Vision conduct a townwide revaluation?
Okay,
Let me ask you. Let me retract.
that's a loaded question.
How does I want to ask about how Vision conducts a townwide revaluation in Connecticut. So let me break it down. How would you describe the mass appraisal process?
So when we do a revaluation, typically we meet with the assessor first. We go over the contract and the timeline. We talk about the data collection guidelines that we're going to utilize. We put together the data collection guidelines, the team, the office. We register with the police department. We put together a press release that goes out. In Enfield, for example, they also went a step further and sent out pre-inspection letters to let the entire community know that the revaluation was taking place, which not all towns do that. So that was a really great thing to do. And then we start the process. We get our team together after, you meet with the assessor. And we do, and it depends. If we're doing a revaluation, then the first phase is the data collection. The second phase is the valuation. The third phase is the field review. The fourth phase is the final valuation. And then finalization of the project is when we have the hearings and the impact notices. So that's kind of an oversight of how we do it. And throughout that process, we are meeting with the assessor constantly. So I don't know how
No,
detailed you want me to get into
no,
it.
that's it. I'll ask you some follow-up. So, the particular classes of real estate that are valued, would it be residential, commercial, industrial, vacant land, farmland, open space, forest land? Am I missing anything else on the real estate side?
No, it's the whole community.
And then and you would not be and as part of your revaluation process, you do not value personal property and motor vehicles, correct?
Correct.
So how would you describe your particular role as a did you say district manager? What was the title again?
I am a district manager, but for the town of Enfield, I was also the project manager.
Okay. So as a project manager, how would you describe the role of the project manager in a revaluation?
So I met with the assessor, and we went over the different phases of the revaluation that I just described. And we make sure that each part of that process is getting done and meeting the timelines. We're making sure communication is ongoing. We're giving status reports of the updates of each phase. And then we're following through with everything through meetings and conversations. Communication is really key in a revaluation to make sure that all the steps get done correctly.
Are individual properties inspected? Well, let me retract that question. Actually, in the last revaluation you did for Enfield, my understanding was that it was one of the revaluations in which the town was supposed to do inspections, but because of COVID, Vision sent out mailers rather than performing inspections of most properties. Is that correct?
Yes. So what happened with Enfield is originally we would have tried to get into the properties, but because of COVID, at the start, before we even signed, it was decided that data mailers would be utilized instead. So the only thing that we did for the data collection portion of it was measure the exterior. And then once that process was completed, we sent data mailers to all the property owners, which again, kept the transparency open of, okay, we've finished the exterior measuring. Here's what we've gathered on the interior information. If there's an issue with this information, they had an opportunity to send that data mailer back in. And if a correction needed to be done, then if we needed to go out in the field, we did. If it didn't, then we would just make the change.
Did Division do any drive-by inspections of properties?
Yes, that's called the field review, and the entire town is done.
So did you do drive-bys of all properties in town?
Yes.
Did you do area inspections?
No.
So is it fair to say that with regard to all properties in town, someone from the revaluation company did a drive-by of the property?
Yes.
And even though mailers were done, did you have an opportunity to get into any properties or whether it be commercial or residential?
When we did building permits, again, it was COVID. So it was a time that was different than any other that we've done revaluations. So, the building permits, I'm sure if we needed to get in, I don't recall exactly how many properties they actually went into. But mostly everything was done via outside or phone calls. I'm sure there was a certain amount that they ended up getting into. But for the most part, because of COVID, everything was done via exteriors.
Okay, so tell me about your, to what extent did you perform exterior inspections of properties?
100%.
And that was that done by drive-by, or were there any walkarounds?
No, the first phase of the revaluation is the data collection. That's when the team's out there and they're going to every property and verifying the buildings and the measurements. The next phase, after we do the valuation, the preliminary numbers, is the field review. That's when the drive-by is done. So that's later in the project.
During your revaluation process, is there an opportunity for public participation?
Well, the data mailers is their first opportunity of public participation. And then when we have the hearings, the informal hearings is the second opportunity for public participation. They can come in, they can ask questions about their valuations. We'll review the property record card. If we have to go back out there, we do that. And that's done in the project finalization when we send out the impact notice.
And during the informals, is there an opportunity for the revaluation company to make a change on someone's property if they bring certain information to your attention that would compel you to make a change?
Yes.
And with regard to the last revaluation, Enfield, do you know whether any values were changed during the informal meetings as a result of information provided by property owners?
Yes.
And do you know for how many properties that happened?
I do. I looked it up for you last night.
Okay.
So we had 230 property owners make an appointment.
Mhm.
And of that, we ended up having 291 second notices go out. Of those second notices, approximately half of those had changes on them.
So now so you had 230 meetings, and as a
230 appointments made.
and as a result of the 230 appointments, you had 291 notices that went out. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if there's 230 meetings, but then 291 notices that went out, is it a fair assumption then that for me to make that that some folks had more than one property they discussed?
That's correct. They had more than one property, or we had walk-ins. Or people came in that maybe dealt with someone at the counter at the assessor's office, maybe had a simple change, and that person wrote out a hearing slip. Like, let's say you came into the office and you spoke to Todd or Vicky and you said, all right, I reviewed my property, everything looks good, but I don't have wood siding, I now have vinyl siding, something like that. If there was a change made that way, they would give that to us, type of thing. So there's a abundance of ways. Like, some people can come in, they have 10 properties, so that's why you have a different number there. But I did look them both up.
So is it about, so how many so you said you had 291 second notices that went out as a result of the informal meetings, and there were about in half of those there were changes in the property value, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And presumably, well, let me ask you a question. Were those changes reductions?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if typically they're reductions, but they can also go up.
Okay.
When you come into an informal hearing, they could be a change, a no change. They could go up, they could go down. It depends what comes out of the informal hearing. It's an opportunity for the property owner to come in and discuss their property and make sure all the information is accurate. And sometimes it ends up going up as a result, as well as down. And there were also notices that were sent out that were the result of Todd doing some notices when he did the farmland and some final changes there, and those notices were sent out as well. But those weren't hearings that Vision had. They were just value changes. And so those notices got sent out with our notices.
Okay.
So it was really, you know, in the big picture of things, that was less than 2% of property owners that came in. So that's very good.
Yes, I agree. So during the process, does Vision provide notice to individual taxpayers regarding the revaluation process or their new values? Could you tell me about what notices Vision sends during the reval?
Throughout the whole revaluation?
Yeah, so pursuant to your contract with the town, what notices do you provide to property owners?
So, well, I can tell you what we did in Enfield. I know that Della, who was the assessor at the beginning of the job, she put an article in the newspaper talking about the revaluation. So that was the first thing. And then she sent out the pre-notification letter. Again, that was another notice. And then we sent out the data mailers. And then we sent out the data mailers go to all improved properties. And then we sent out the impact notices, and those go to everyone but exempts. And then we send out a second notice telling them the results of the informal hearings to the people who came in. So whether or not they had a change, a no change, or their value went up, they got a second notice. And the values were also listed up on the website. So they had an opportunity to go up and review their values on the website. They had an opportunity to go up and review their neighbor's website properties. So that's another tool that is open that people can go up, and it's a great way. People use it all the time.
And do taxpayers also have an opportunity to, if they have questions, to call Vision?
During the informal hearings they do, and they could call anytime. Like if they had a question and it got referred to myself or to the assessor, where we typically will answer anybody's question throughout.
Yeah, so I'm asking you, outside of the informals, somebody receives their notice, the informals haven't been scheduled yet. Could someone call and ask questions of Vision, or would that have to go first through the assessor's office? How would that happen?
Typically, it goes through the informal hearings first. If that's what you're asking. So the informal hearings is the first step. And then
I'm asking you, outside of the informal hearings, could somebody call Vision to ask questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Generally, what type of information received from individual property owners during the informal meetings does Vision take into account?
So when people come in, some people just come in and ask questions. They want to get educated. They want to understand the process. What did you do? How did you get there? Some people bring in appraisals. Some people bring in pictures. Some people want to understand the sales. So we'll have the copies of all the sales that we utilize during the revaluation, and we explain to them how we came to the values. It's all an informal process to make sure that they understand what's on their property record card and where it came from. And so those are the different types of things people typically bring in. Okay. Or have a conversation about. you know, there's so much information out there now where they can use the internet and they can go on the website. People come prepared, the ones that are coming in.
If someone contests the assessment of their real estate based upon the fact that they believe that a portion of their residence was valued as being finished and is in fact unfinished, what kind of proof would you ask for to try to resolve that issue?
Typically, we would go back out and recheck that property, because again, that's a pretty unique situation. If somebody's saying like above in a garage, we had it as finished and it's unfinished, we would go back out and do an inspection. If we didn't do that, they usually would bring in pictures. But in a normal circumstance, we typically would go back out there and recheck it.
If for some reason you weren't able to get into the property because there was a concern about you going in because of, for example, COVID, have you, in lieu of doing an inspection, accepted photos or video?
Yeah, usually we do.
So I want to talk about or ask you about, have you talk about Enfield selection of vision for the revaluation. So was vision selected? So my understanding is that vision was selected to do the revaluation, the 2021 revaluation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall when vision was selected?
So I checked with the sales department. So the town issued their RFP on January 10th, 2020. The RFP was titled "The Revaluation Program of All Real Property, Taxable and Exempt, Effective for the Grand List of October 1st, 2021. Vision responded to the RFP on 1/23/2020. Am I giving you too much information?
No, not at all.
Okay. There was no on-site interview. The award in the contract was delayed because of the start of COVID. So the contract wasn't signed until May 18th of 2020. And that's when it was decided that data mailers were going to be substituted for the interiors due to COVID.
Did you participate in the RFP process, including the interviews with the town of Enfield?
I did not.
Do you know who for the town of Enfield was involved with selecting vision for the revaluation?
I do not know that.
Has Vision conducted the revaluation in Enfield in the past, prior to 2021?
Yes.
Do you remember which revaluations Enfield, you've been at the company for a while, which revaluations Enfield has, the Vision has performed on behalf of the town of Enfield?
I know the last two we did. So it would have been what, 2016 and then 2011 is the two I recall.
Is it fair to say the Vision is familiar with the properties and demographics in Enfield when it conducted the 21 reval based on its prior experience in conducting revals in Enfield?
Yes.
Were there advantages to Vision in being able to in doing the revaluation in 2021 based on its past experience in conducting the revaluation in the town in prior years?
I don't know if I'd call it advantages, but it's certainly helpful because we have a history with the town. The town is set up on the vision system. And, you know, we've worked with the assessor in the past. And some of the same team players were, you know, still at vision and were able to work there again. So the advantage is knowledge.
How long have you personally been involved with Enfield's revaluations?
I believe it's just the last two. I was trying to remember if I was there prior, and I don't remember being there prior to that. but I'm getting old.
Have you received complaints from Enfield property owners in previous revaluation years?
Well, we always get informal hearings, so we always receive some people who are unhappy with their tax bill, but that is part of the revaluation process. It's to educate and to also get information that we're not possibly aware of, so we can make corrections if they need to be.
With regard to the 21 revaluation, did you, as far as complaints you received in that, assuming you received some in that revaluation, do you remember whether comparatively there were more complaints or the same, about the same, more or less than for the 21 reval than in previous revaluations that you've conducted, like in 2016, 2011?
I do not remember the numbers for 2011 and 2016, but I can tell you that having, less than 300 properties for informal hearings in a town of 15,000 plus properties is a successful revaluation.
Division follow its normal procedure and process in the 21 revals that had done in prior revaluations?
Yes.
With regard to the questionnaires that were sent to folks, do you know approximately what percentage were completed and returned?
I don't know that off the top of my head. They are all returned to the town. So you definitely could get that information from the town because they have them all. We had them return it if there were corrections only. So we didn't ask for the ones to be returned that didn't have a change on it. A lot of times people return them anyway, just because they want you to know that they didn't have a change. But those are all at the assessor's office, and they could count them if you needed it.
So are you aware of a report that was issued in May of 2022 by the Enfield Board of Assessment Appeals regarding the revaluation process in Enfield?
No, I am not.
Okay. So in that, there was, I'll tell you, there was a report issued by the Board of Assessment Appeals, and there were some statements made by the BAA chair in that report. And one of the statements that was made by the BAA chair, Mr. Attorney Tom Tyler, was Vision's report was more than just a little flawed. Do you agree with Mr. Tyler's statement that Vision's work in the revaluation in Enfield was more than just a little flawed?
No, I do not.
Could you tell me why? First of all, do you feel that the report or the work done by Vision in the 21 revaluation was at all flawed?
I do not. It was an excellent revaluation. The statistics stand for themselves.
Tell me why, please.
Because our sales analysis, and I'm going to speak to the residential, is very comprehensive. It breaks down all the sales that have occurred in the town numerous different ways. It breaks it down by style, by location, by year built, by building size, by sales date quartile, by sales price quartile. There's so many different ways that we look at these sales and make sure that it's equitable and that it meets all the standards. And Enfield's was very good. And all of those reports are in that book. And the chairman never called me once and asked me to have a meeting with him, I would have been more than happy to come there and sit down with him.
Did any other members of the Board of Assessment Appeals contact you to inquire about Vision's work in the 21 revaluation?
No,
You talked about the work that the results of the revaluation and your opinion of it. I think you said you thought it was a successful revaluation. Is that correct?
yes, absolutely.
In order for a town to complete its revaluation, does the town need to obtain approval from the state of Connecticut?
Yes.
Could you tell me about what that process is?
So the state of Connecticut requires us to send them all of the sales that are qualified and unqualified. And the coding for the validity of all of the sales is reviewed by the state of Connecticut. We also are required to send them a price-related differential report and an unsold property test report and the results of those reports.
And so with regard to the 21 revaluation, did Vision submit all of the required reports to the state of Connecticut for approval?
We did, yes.
And did the state of Connecticut raise any concerns whatsoever regarding Vision's work in the 2021 revaluation for the town of Enfield?
No, it was fine. There was one, when we submit it, we have to, the reports come out on a PDF, right? Because it's an unchangeable report, right? And then they now want us to put it on Excel as well, so they can subsort the report in many different ways if they want to look at it. So when I sent them the reports in Excel, I made an error on one of the formulas. I had to correct that error. But that wasn't, I would not call that anything wrong with it. It was just, I needed to fix my formula.
Okay, so is it fair to say that there was a clerical mistake with regard to one formula that was used in the revaluation?
Well, on the Excel report, there was nothing wrong with the PDF report. So when I put the report on Excel, I made an error in the way that the formula was done, so it didn't round exactly to the same number. I wouldn't call it an error. I would just call it a mistake that I had to fix. And then when I fixed it, it was fine.
But just to be clear, that was a mistake with regard to the reporting to the state of Connecticut, not with regard to the actual revaluation work that was done, correct?
Correct.
So for example, the formula that was used,
And
what formula are we even talking about?
So I don't even remember off the top of my head, but it wasn't a mistake. Like, it got sent to them and she said, could you fix this? And I did, and I sent it back and it matched exactly. So it was just when I put it on the Excel report, it wasn't a mistake in the revaluation.
I understand. So I'm just trying to clarify for the record. So what formula was it? Do you remember?
I don't.
Okay. Whatever formula it was, is it fair to say that it was done, the formula was correctly used in the revaluation? However, when you reported the revaluation to Vision in a workable Excel spreadsheet, that one of the formulas that was actually used wasn't properly, there was a clerical error. And so, and what was reported to the state was incorrect with regard to that one formula. Is that correct?
No, because the PDF was accurate. So it's the same report, it's just done in two different ways. And when she got it, she sent it right back and I corrected it and sent it back. So I'm not going to say it was a mistake that was reported to the state, because the final document the state had was fine.
Okay, so there were no errors whatsoever in what was reported to the state for the revaluation, correct?
That's
For
correct.
Enfield. And what happened was you submitted a PDF and also a Excel spreadsheet that was in a workable format, and that the PDF, which had the formulas that you use in the revaluation, was correct. And when you did the Excel spreadsheet, there was one formula that had a clerical error, and that was brought to your attention, and you corrected it. And so both the PDF and the Excel spreadsheet correctly reflected the formulas that were used in the revaluation.
Correct. Thank you.
And by the way, this is the office of OPM, correct?
Yes,
And so OPM, on behalf of the state of Connecticut, certified certified visions revaluation for Enfield.
yes,
And is it fair to say that is it correct that the state of Connecticut confirmed that the revaluation was done correctly?
yes.
And did the state of Connecticut find any errors whatsoever or raise any concerns at all with regard to the revaluation work that was done in Enfield in 2021?
No, the only other issue that she recommended to the assessor's office was that they continue to monitor their sales and that they make sure that their sales information is accurate. And that's a standard thing that they say.
And why was it said here?
Why was it said?
Yes. Well, why did they bring that to your, why do you think OPM brought that to your attention for the 21 reval in Enfield?
Well, when we do the unsold property test, you can fall between 95 and 105, and we were at a 104. And so I think that makes them go, okay, as you move forward, make sure that you're, again, getting all your sales information, and the information that's on the sales reflects what's on the property. That's very standard.
Mr. Tyler cited in his report that Vision's work was I'm sorry, let me recheck. Mr. Tyler, in his report, in support of his statement that the Vision's work was more than just a little flawed, stated that Vision's work was influenced by interviews with knowledgeable Vision's work was influenced by interviews with folks who were knowledgeable, local brokers and real estate agents. And then he raised concerns about those real estate agents whom Vision relied on. For example, he made a statement that that Vision, with regard to any local brokers, that Vision only communicated with a woman from one broker from Wallingford. Is that could you tell me, did Vision in its revaluation work in Enfield in 2021 rely upon any let me ask you, did you conduct any interviews with knowledgeable local brokers and real estate agents?
No, I don't want to put it that way. So we put that in there because when we have questions on sales, we will reach out if we need to. So I reached out to the broker that was in Wallingford, if only a couple of times, because there might have been a sale that I wanted to know, can you get me any more information on this than what I'm seeing in the browsers? And, you go on, the internet gives you a ton of information, but sometimes we need a little bit more. When I worked with Della, she knew that town inside and out. And if she had a question on a sale, she would just pick up the phone and she would call someone she knew. So, and there really weren't that many that we needed to call, because again, we've had the history of this town. We know the boundaries of the neighborhoods. Della was a hands-on assessor. So we did not need to rely on brokers and real estate agents because, again, they're a tool. If you need them, you can reach out and ask questions. But she had a long-standing knowledge base of her own town that was phenomenal to work with and always has been. And so Vicki Rose, she was in the office. She knew so much about that town inside and out that if we had questions on sales, we would work with each other. We would work with, looking sales up and finding the answers. So to say that I sat down with different local brokers. No, I did not. I reached out a couple of times to the broker that I knew in Wallingford on sales, but that was it.
So, but you mentioned Della and her knowledge of the town and Vicky Rose. So Vicky Rose was there, was still employed with the assessor's office when you conducted the 21 revaluation, correct?
Yes,
And from time to time, did you rely upon her or consult with her regarding sales or information regarding properties that were sold that were taken into account in the 21 reval?
sure. Like and it was, when you say it like that, it was very infrequent. Like
I
most of
understand.
the time I can find this information out for myself.
I
You
get how it
know,
works.
there's so much information on the internet that, it's really only the unique sales, the outliers, the ones that we have questions on, like, is this really a good sale? Should we be using this in the analysis? Someone might know someone. And that's where I say the knowledge base in that office was phenomenal, because they'd been there for so long. They know the town so well.
And by the way, I get it, but at the same time, I understand how generally how a master revaluation process works
Mhm.
and how you may work with the assessor's office. But again, there is a concern raised by the Board of Assessment Appeals about the Vision's reliance on local brokers and real estate agents. So therefore, that's why I'm going into these questions. So um, so Vicky Rose was there when you conducted the revaluation, but Della at some point left while you were doing your revaluation. Is that correct?
Yes, and to just go back to one point, we had over 500 sales in that town. We had a ton of data. It wasn't like we didn't have enough data to conduct this revaluation.
Was Della available to you during the revaluation process to ask her questions about properties?
Yes, up
And
until
even
she left, obviously.
well, even after she left, my understanding was she was still around in some capacity. Is that correct?
No, she was more or less gone the rest of the time after she left. Like, I understand she came back for a while, but once she had left the town, I didn't really talk to Della after that.
So with regard to local brokers, was the only broker that you consulted with a broker in Wallingford?
Yes, and it was only to ask a couple of questions about sales.
And did that broker have access to the MLS system that you may not have in Connecticut?
Yes,
Um, was it a mistake? So that person was in Wallingford. What information, what knowledge did that broker have of the Enfield market?
I didn't ask her questions about the Enfield market. I asked her about just a couple of specific sales
So,
information that I was looking for.
so is it fair to say that broker was used really for access to the MLS system in Connecticut because they were a broker and had that certain access that you may not have had?
Yes, on a specific couple of sales. I don't even remember what they were. But if I was trying to find an answer and I couldn't get it on my own, sometimes they have access, to notes in the background that I don't see. And that would be information that I would try to get from a broker or a real estate agent. Just like if when Della was there, she'd pick up the phone and call somebody she knew to try to get more information about a particular sale.
So you didn't contact any, but with regard to local brokers or real estate agents in Enfield, did you work with any of those folks for the 21 reval?
I did not.
Do you think it was a mistake not to have worked with any of those folks in the 21 reval?
No,
Could you tell me why?
because we had enough data. Typically, we'll reach back out if we have questions and issues. That wasn't the experience in Enfield. And like I said, we started the analysis early, so I did work with Della early on, and we've worked together in the past, so we pretty much, she knew the town inside and out, and she would know the sales. So between the two of us, we got through a lot of the questions. If there were questions, a lot of it is pretty straightforward. Enfield's not that hard of a town.
Is it fair to say that to the extent that you had questions about sales where it was helpful to get information from somebody locally, that you had the opportunity, that you worked with Vicky Rose and Della to assist you with getting that information?
Most of the time it was Della.
Okay. If you did not have an opportunity to work, if you didn't have Della, who you've described as being very knowledgeable of Enfield and having great access to information in Enfield, is it possible that you would have worked with a local broker or local brokers or real estate agents to provide the information and insight that Della had provided to you?
Sure, we'll pick up the phone anytime and call a real estate agent if we need to get more information. It's common practice.
It sounds like here that wasn't necessary because you did have the ability to go to Della and ask her that information, have her provide you with that insight.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so much of that information is out there now. It's not hard to find. It's not like I had to call her all the time. It was really only when you need it for specific properties that you had questions on.
In his report, Mr. Attorney Tyler also accused Vision of failing to provide consistent depreciation schedules for residential and retail properties. And he made reference for residential to FY 2020 and 2021, and then for retail FY 2020. Do you agree with his statement that Vision failed to provide consistent depreciation schedules for residential and retail properties?
No, I do not agree with that statement.
Why?
Because the depreciation is table driven. So that's why we use a table, so that it will be consistent. And that the same depreciation is applied based upon the condition of the property and the age of the property. That's why we have depreciation tables.
What's the role of the depreciation schedules in a mass appraisal?
The role of the depreciation schedule is to come up with the physical depreciation that you're going to apply to a property based upon its age and its condition.
How are depreciation schedules utilized in a modified cost approach?
So the depreciation table is utilized based upon the year built. So one of the ways that we define that in the cost approach is that, again, utilizing the sales, one of the tests that we do is by year built. So the sales are broken out by the age of the property. Again, the medians and the CODs have to meet certain standards. And that way that we know the depreciation table is working because it's broken out before 1940, 1940 to 1950, 1950 to 1960, et cetera, up until brand new housing. And we know that that depreciation table is working when your report is working, when your standards are being met, your CODs, your medians, and they were all met in Enfield.
What is the source of the depreciation schedule or information used by Vision?
So it's called the EYB table, and it's again in the manual so everybody can see it. It's based on the base year of 2021, and it's 1% per year. And then as the properties get older, obviously you can't go 1% forever. You'd run out of depreciation. Houses are older than that. So the table starts to increase in the amount of depreciation you give for older homes. That is the source of the depreciation table.
With regard to the information or the source of the of information used for the depreciation schedules in the 21 revaluation in Enfield? Was there anything out of the norm?
Nope,
And did anyone from OPM raise any concerns or questions about the depreciation schedules used by Vision for the 21 revaluation in Enfield?
nope,
Did the assessor or anyone else from the assessor's office raise any concerns about the information used by Vision for the depreciation schedules in 21?
nope.
When you're valuing retail or commercial property as part of a mass appraisal process, do you often are you often deriving value by the income approach?
Yes, income and cost.
Well, which is it? I mean, for example, if you've got a strip plaza, commercial property, are you using the income approach or the cost approach?
They do both. And when they reconcile, they do income and cost. I had a commercial appraiser who did the values in Enfield. So the specifics of that, you'd want to talk with him. But the
Who
income
was
approach is based on income and cost.
the commercial appraiser you used?
Jim Williams
And where's Jim Williams out of?
out of Connecticut,
Oh, do you know where?
Willimantic.
And is Jim Williams his name, correct?
Yes,
What company is he at?
he's still at Vision.
So is he a Vision employee?
Yes,
All right, so he doesn't have his own appraisal company?
no,
All right, so he's a commercial appraiser that works for Vision full
yes.
time. And is Mr. Williams, is he, do you know what certifications he has to perform appraisal work in Connecticut?
He has the same certifications as I do.
Is he an MAI?
No,
So when you say same certifications as you do, is he a certified appraiser in Connecticut?
he has the certifications that he needs through OPM, which is you have to pass 3 different tests for OPM. And he has those, so he has a supervisor's certification.
Yeah, you said when he did the commercial properties, he used both the income and cost approach. That's where I'm a little confused, because if he's using the income approach, the income and cost approach are two separate approaches to
Right,
value.
but they reconcile them at the end.
When you say reconcile, does that mean that they derive a so let's use the example of a commercial strip plaza. He derives a value, let's say 2.5 million under the income approach, and then he would separately, then what he do is separately do a value, use the cost approach method to value to derive a separate value based on the cost approach.
Yes,
And let's assume that value was $2 million. When you say then there's a reconciliation, is it an example like that, would it be that, well, I got the 2.5 million under the income approach, the cost approach verifies that it's within range, and therefore I'm going to use the 2.5, or or the reconciliation result in blending value, taking the 2.5 and averaging them out to 2.25? What happens in the reconciliation process?
during the reconciliation process, they're looking at if there was that big of a difference, why? Are they missing something? So they want to be within a certain percentage in the reconciliation between cost and income.
And what is that percentage?
Typically, I'm going to say it's between 80 and 120, but again, you'd have to talk to Jim about that.
80 and 120% wise?
Mhm. I think it's actually smaller than that, but I'm not 100% sure what he did in Enfield off the top of my head. So I prefer that you ask him those questions.
Would you help us arrange for a brief interview with him?
Sure.
Okay, so after this, if you could just send an email to me and Matt, and if you could give him a call first, let him know what we're doing, and then if you could introduce the two of us over email, and I could send him out today some dates and times, so we could just conduct a brief interview with him. My assumption is it would be probably a little shorter than yours, so I would say an hour or less.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Um, Mr. Tyler also raised a concern in his report about Vision creating what he called a fountain of youth formula. And the basis for that characterization was that he accused Vision of making residential properties younger as they aged, apparently in order to artificially inflate value for tax revaluation purposes. Are you familiar with this issue that was raised by folks on the BAA regarding what they've described as this fountain of youth formula?
No, I've never heard that before. I
Uh,
don't even know what that means.
Let me try to give you some more explanation. Apparently, there were some properties which they believe were upgraded from average to good condition with no improvements being done. Were you aware of that?
That does happen. They get moved from average to good, but there's typically a reason for it. So the no reason, that's not true.
What would be the reason? So if you have a property, let's say a house,
Yeah.
and no significant improvements have been done, and in the 16 revaluation, it was the condition was average, and then in the 21 condition and 21 reval, it's good.
Mhm.
How would that happen?
So when we go out and do the field review, we're observing the property. And if there's something about the property, like if I was looking at it and it had a physical change, like it had new siding, new windows, new roof, I might even bring it up to very good. If it had a couple of those things, I might bring it up to good. It's only a 5% difference. So that is just, if we look at a building permit and the building permit has something on it that says they did a new kitchen, they did a new bathroom.
I get all that. That makes sense. What I'm asking you though is, let's use an example. My house, I don't pull any building permits, and I don't do any work that would necessitate pulling a building permit. And in the 16 reval, my property is in an average, determined by Vision to be an average condition. And then in 21 reval, it's in good condition.
Mhm.
Would there be any justifiable basis for increasing the condition on my property from average to good if there were no significant improvements done to the property in that 5-year period of time?
So I would say no to that, other than when we're out doing field review, we make physical observations of properties. And if the person doing the field review felt that that property was in good condition when they were looking at it, then they may have changed it.
So is it fair to say that one reason, or the reason why the condition of a property could increase from, for example, average to good without any significant improvements done during the, for example, 5-year revaluation period? The reason would potentially be that a prior inspector thought it was in average condition, and then a different inspector 5 years later had a difference of opinion and thought it was in good condition.
That's one explanation. And another explanation is, again, if there were building permits on it, or if there were something came back on the data mailer that they told us something, or if it was a sale and we had reviewed the information on the sale property and on MLS, even though they didn't take out any permits, we saw that there was changes in the interior of the property and it had been upgraded. Average to good is not a lot. We can make changes just based on those observations. Typically, it is an observation that makes us make a change.
Okay. And is it fair to say that sometimes those observations are made by, for example, reviewing listings, information online about a property in which you've realized that the condition has changed?
Yes.
And is it fair? And does it happen sometimes where maybe the condition didn't change, but you were unaware? For example, in 16, you were unaware that the kitchen was redone. But what happened is in 20, they listed the property for sale, didn't sell, but they listed it for sale, took it off the market, and you happen to see the listing. And in that listing, you realize that the condition of the kitchen was much better than you thought it was in 16, because you didn't do an inspection in 16. But they must have redone the kitchen without permits. and in 20 you realize that they had a brand new kitchen, it may or may not have existed in that condition in 16, but because of this change in the kitchen, even if maybe the work was done in 15, you didn't know about it. Now all of a sudden you caught it, and so you made the change on the 21 field card, even though from 16 to 21 there was no change, there was no work done, but the work was done in 15. You didn't catch it until the 21 reval. Does that happen?
Yes, it does. Because and again, you gave a perfect example. We're not there for 5 years. Over that course of time, if we see a transfer on the property and there's information there and it's a qualified sale, and we have a question about that property, we can easily look that property up and review what we have on the inside if we had a question.
Does Vision take advantage of information that property owners put online regarding their property for sale, to confirm, the interior properties?
Yes, we use all tools.
Okay. And has Vision's ability to do that increased over time as probably more people, I would assume, for listings or posting more information about their property?
Yes, I mean, listings have always been a great tool to get interior information. It's just more readily available now.
For purposes of determining the condition of a property as part of the revaluation, who does that for the revalue? Who does it? Is it the assessor, the revaluation company? Who does that?
Typically, it's the revaluation company. But that doesn't mean that assessor doesn't change them if they feel the need to.
Does the effective year bill, EYB, affect the valuation of a property?
Yes,
Why?
because it's the depreciation. So again, once we create that table, it goes average, good, very good, excellent, rebuilt, and then vice versa, the other way, fair, poor, very poor. So you have 3 types of depreciation. You have physical, you have functional, and you have economic depreciation. So, that is one way that we change that depreciation is through the actual year bill in the EYB. So when we put a condition on a property that says average or good, that is creating that EYB that you see written there or don't see. It's all that EYB chart shows up in 3 different places, through the EYB, through the percent good, and through the depreciation code, which is the average, the good, the very good.
Well, just so we're clear, I'm talking about effective year bill, not actual year bill. So my question, so you answered, so I believe your response was that the determination of the effective year bill does have an effect on the value.
Yes.
Okay. And how do you derive the effective year bill?
So again, it's a table, okay, based upon the actual age of the property. So say on the vertical axis is 2021, 2020, 2019, you get 1% per year as you're going down. And every town is a little bit different. As it continues, you might give more depreciation for the older properties. So you get your base at average. And then we create a chart that then goes to good, very good, and vice versa, fair, poor. And so that table is what gives you your percent good that you see on a property record card. And that percent good is also described by the condition that we put on the property, which is average, good, very good. It's all the same table.
My recollection of the assessor's interview was that he told us that the effective year bill was not a factor in the valuation, that it was a after the fact determination that could be included on the field card, but that the effective year bill, the EYB, was actually not a factor that was relied upon in determining the value or under the modified cost approach, for example, for a residential property. Do you disagree with his statement?
So the EYB and the condition produce the same result, which is the percent good of the depreciation. So whether or not the EYB, that number is just the base year minus the year that's in the table gives you the EYB number, right? When you say average on that table, the effective year built would be that same as the average. So where you are in the table, it's set up that, so if it was 1 year old, right, 2021, and it was built in 2020 and it got 1% depreciation, the EYB would be 2020. Okay, the average that we put in produces that number 2020 in the table. So if we take the EYB out, it doesn't matter. The average is still going to produce the same number. That's what produces the EYB. It's just another way of explaining the same depreciation, which is the percent good.
But I'm confused because when I asked you the question as to whether, I said, does the effective year built affect the valuation of the property? And you said yes.
Yes.
And so if it affects the valuation of the property, and if you just remove it, wouldn't that affect the value of the property?
Yeah, if you took out the condition, then it would zero out the depreciation, which would zero out the EYB, so you'd have zero value.
No, but that's not what, no, that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is if you take out the EYB, let's assume on the field card, you remove the EYB. Will that affect the ultimate value you get for a residential property?
Oh, no. You mean like you suppress it so it doesn't show up on the field card?
No, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, let's assume you did a value on my home, okay? So I've got I have a property that was built in, I think originally built in 1910. It's a Georgia colonial, 4,000 square feet, 1.75 acres of land. There was an addition put on it in the 80s. So, and the house has been, redone. There's been work done over the years. So, when you value my home, you calculate an effective year built. Okay, so you value my property as part of the revaluation, and you have an effective year built in the model, and you render a value of 600,000. Okay, and then I say to you, I don't like the way you did my value. I don't like this effective year built nonsense. I don't like it. I have a real issue with this. I want you to remove it. Let's assume I'm the assessor. I want you to remove it. And you take the effective year built. I want you to do the value without the effective year built. Will you end up at 600,000, the exact same 600,000, or is it possible that by taking the effective year built calculation factor out of the analysis, that you would end up with a different number?
In our system, when you say you would take it out, you can't take it out. You would suppress it because it's part of the table. So
Well, when you say suppress it, you mean you would not show it on the field card, correct?
Correct.
But
it's still in there because it's part of the table. And the
so if it's part of the table, so this is what I'm trying to get at. You valued my property for 600,000, and and the effective year built was within the model for how you came up with the value, correct?
Mm-hmm. It's just another way of saying there's this many years has been removed, which produces this effective year built.
But I've told you, I want you to change your table. I don't like it. I don't like this effective year built nonsense. Don't like it. And for whatever reason, you're going to listen to me. Okay.
Okay.
So, or you're just going to pacify me for some reason. So you say, okay, I'm going to redo the table. I'm going to take effective year built out. It's not going to be it's not going to be a factor we consider. We won't consider effective year built.
Okay.
You first came up with 600,000. Now you took it out. Is it possible you come up with a different number because you're not using the effective year built is not part of your calculation?
No.
Why?
Because the effective year built is just another way of saying the percent of depreciation that we've created in the table. So if you don't want to see the effective year built and I take it out, you're still gonna say, let's say you got 30% depreciation, as I have your house in whatever, I'm gonna use average for simplicity. It's still gonna be 30% whether I take that EYB number out.
By the way, when I say take it out, I don't want you to like remove it from the field cards. I can't see it. I don't want you to use it as part of your calculation. I want you to recalculate it without an effective year built calculation, and you're still going to come up with the same number you're saying. Is that correct?
Yes,
So if that's the case, if whether you use or don't use an effective year built factor in your evaluation, you're going to come up with the exact same number. Then if
yes,
that's the case, then when you answered for me before that the effective year build does affect the valuation, was your answer incorrect? Because in fact, it doesn't.
it's just two different ways of reading the same table, so if you don't want us to use effective year built, then we won't put it on there, but the number of years that we created in the table are still gonna be the same. So,
But that's maybe you're misunderstanding my questions, because the assessor was pretty clear that effective year built is an after the fact calculation. His testimony was effective year built is a result of taking the condition of the property and the actual year built, and then as a result of calculating those two factors, you end up with an effective year built. Is that correct?
yes,
And he said it's an after the fact calculation. So condition of the property affects value. Is that correct?
yes,
And he said that the actual year built that was used in the table affects the value.
yes,
And he said effective year built is not a factor that actually affects the value. It's an after the fact number that's really just a reference point.
you could say it that way. It's all it is it's the table, the base year 2021 minus the number of years is the
I get what you're
effective year
saying,
built.
but
So if you take it off, it's just a reference. He's correct. It is just a
all right.
reference.
So if it's just a reference, then would it be correct? Then was your prior answer that the effective year built affects the valuation, that it would change the valuation of the property, that was wrong? That
I guess
actually
if you
it
want to
doesn't.
say it that way, then yes.
I'm just trying to figure out. I'm just trying to figure out the issue. And if if you remove the effective year built, not suppress it on the field card, but if you just remove it as a factor, you don't consider it at all. You do the valuation as if you didn't even know what the heck effective year built meant. You didn't use it. If you you would end up at the same value based on your methodology, the manner, the process you use for valuing the property. You've said you come up with the same value
Correct,
with or without it, right?
correct.
So if you come up with the exact same value for the property in your methodology, whether or not you use effective year built, then the effective year built doesn't affect the valuation of the property.
That's correct.
Okay. And by the way, you don't have to agree with the assessor.
No, it's just a
there's
different way of looking at it. You know, it's all the same table. So it's
I get
can be
it.
confusing, which is, you know,
It sounds like he was right, and maybe I think maybe I confused you with the way I asked you the questions, but you've confirmed for me the same thing that he said, so that's fine.
okay, sorry.
Do you know? So, are you aware of the fact that in Enfield the assessor suppressed the EYB on the field cards that were publicly available?
I was aware when you told me.
But prior to that, did you know that?
No,
Are you aware of other municipalities in Connecticut where the assessor would suppress the EYB factor on the field card?
yes.
Tell me of what other communities, what's your experience with it, what's your knowledge about what other assessors have done with that factor?
Well, again, you know, just like you're trying to understand it, it can be confusing. So they suppress it, so the confusion is taken away, because whether or not it's there or not doesn't change the value. What's driving the value is it's table driven. The effective year built is just the result of the table.
And do you know what other towns may have suppressed the EYB factor on the field cards?
You know, I could find some out for you off the top of my head. I'm not exactly sure, but
You
I
don't
can
have it
take some.
memorized? You don't
I
know
do
every
n-
single
I
town?
do
Okay.
not have it memorized. But you know, I probably could find 3 or 4 right just by making a few phone calls.
But is it fair to say that that as you sit here today, it's your understanding that other assessors have done this?
Yes,
So is it considered is it, would you say it's a standard practice for for assessors to suppress that, the EYB calculation, reference on the field cards?
I don't know if I'd call it standard. It's personal choice.
Okay. Um,
These cards can be customized, so
but even if but whether you take it off or not, it doesn't affect the value.
doesn't affect it.
Does does Vision have any role with respect to the application of PA 490 classifications or the in any towns?
Yes.
Tell me how.
So if they, typically the assessors will tell us, you know, how many acres in this, and this, whatever, you know, whether it's farm, forest, and what type, is it pasture or woodlands? And we would make sure that that aligns, but most of the time, the assessors do that themselves. But
So when
sometimes we have to do it. It just depends. I mean, usually it's already on the cards because people who are in farm forest have to apply for it. So it comes through the assessor's office. They decide how many acres are in each category.
is it fair to say that that the assessor makes the determination as to whether a property should receive a PA 490 classification and the manner in which it should be classified? For example, for farmland, whether whether it's tillable A, B, or C, the soil, and
Yes,
that Vision would just after the fact do calculations.
yes. Or just, you know, make sure the calculations are working correctly.
Does Vision ever have any role in making any determinations for towns as to whether property should be tax exempt?
No.
Is there any other information that you would like to share with me at this time? You think would be helpful to my investigation of the revaluation process in Enfield?
Well, the one thing I just want to, you know, as I was reviewing everything, the numbers in Enfield, it was a really good revaluation. The standards were met, the CODs were good. I was very proud of it when we were done.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to share um, about you know, Vision's work with regard to the revaluation or the assessor?
No, I mean, I thought it was a successful revaluation. I know at the end of the job that Todd did a presentation in front of the council and reported the results of the revaluation. And, you know, like I said, it was a good job. The numbers are good, the manual is good. It provides all the different statistics that were used and all the different sales I was talking about. So, you know, I'm particularly proud of the job we did in Enfield.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your time. And before I finish, actually, let me just ask Matt. Matt, do you have anything that you'd like to add, or I shouldn't say add? Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Is there any, well, first of all, June has offered to send us her resume, which will be helpful to have her updated resume. Is there any other documents that you think or records that would be helpful for her to produce to us?
I mean, I think we have everything in our file already. I mean, June, if it's really easy to pull a sample of each of the notices sent to a property owner.
Okay,
I mean, I think we already have that in our file, but just for ease of access.
That would be helpful. And then also, Matt, do you have the whole revaluation manual?
That's also what I was going to ask. I believe we do, but if you could send that over, just so I'm sure we have it.
If you could send over digital, that'd be great, the reval
Yeah.
manual.
I can do that.
Thank you, June.
Evaluation and notice.
And you're going to introduce me to your commercial appraiser as well.
Yes, I will take care of that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, great. I hope I answered everything for you.
I think you did. I want to thank you for your time, and when the report is issued, it's going to be a public document. So if I remember to, hopefully Matt or I will remember to email it to you. If we don't, you could ask the assessor to send you a copy as well,
Okay,
if you'd like to read it.
okay, great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all your time, and we may be in touch with you for some further questions, but I can't think of anything else at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, June.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
June.